بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. The Quranic theme that I'm going to share with you tonight is one of great interest to me, and I think it's one of the unnoticed Quranic themes, and it's not talked about enough and it's not understood enough. And I've titled it by Divine Hypotheses. So I'm going to explain what that means before I go through the verses. In your life, regarding the future or the past, using a hypothesis, using if, it can be quite dramatic. It can harm you as a person. If you look at the past and say, had I done this, or if that had happened, or if this had occurred, or you look at the future and you say that you use this if, which is a hypothesis. You're saying it's a theory. Right? If you get caught up in different theories of what could have happened or what can happen, then you get lost. Right? In both ways. If you look at the past and you get caught up in the theories, saying, had this had occurred, or maybe if I just made that one choice, or if I just got there a few minutes earlier, then you end up living in the past and it'll tear you apart. It'll absolutely wreck you because you get so caught up in hypotheses and theories that did not occur, and you can't change them. For the future, you can also get caught up in hypotheses by, if you think about the theories of what can happen, the possibilities of what can occur in the future are endless. There's an infinite number of things that can happen in the future. If you're trying to account for all of them, if you're trying to account for every possibility that can come in the future, then you'll never stop. You'll never end. There's no end to it because the possibilities of what's going to come is just too many. There's too many of them, and many of them are very actually painful and difficult. And if you spend your time worrying about them and thinking about them, you can make yourself sick just by worrying about what may happen in the future. And these hypotheses that we come up with as people is actually very, very harmful to us. So we have to be careful with them. Now, that being said, you are still required as a person to plan to the best of your ability to account for as many variables as you can, at least the common variables, right? Account for what the data suggests or what the norm is in terms of the future, what you're doing and what that usually leads to and what that's going to usually require from you in terms of preparation. You have to plan that out. You're required to do that. You're also required to look at the past and identify your mistakes and then seek forgiveness and seek repentance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the mistakes. You're required to do that as well. But the hypotheses are different. It's where you sit there and you talk about the theoretical. And you get caught up in the theory of what could have or what may have. And that will absolutely suck up all of your time. It will take up all of your energy. It will ruin your mood. And it has no benefit at all. You get nothing out of it. Being caught up on the theories or the hypotheticals of the past do you no good at all. You can't change that. Learn the lesson. What did you learn from this? What will you not do again next time? What will you do next time? Just learn that. Move on now. Now that you've done that, tub ila Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and move on. Keep the regret and the remorse so you don't do it again. That's all. But you're not supposed to be caught. And then for the future, if you spend the time worrying about things that can happen, different possibilities that you have no control over, they're all theoretical, then you will absolutely ruin your mind. And you'll become extremely depressed and very anxious and you're not non-functional. So hypotheses regarding our past and our future are very dangerous things for us to be carrying around and engaging in. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who can make these hypotheses. He is the one who can give us the theoretical. He can tell us what would have happened, what could have happened, right? He's the only one subhanahu wa ta'ala because he has the divine knowledge. Subhanahu, he's omnipotent, he's omniscient. So he knows all. So he knows, had something been done differently in the past, what the outcome would have been now. Also, what you could have done differently now that may occur in the future. Or, had he done things differently for you, what the outcome would have been from you, like what you would have done. How you would have behaved had he changed the circumstances or the environment or put you in a different situation. He knows these hypotheses, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He knows, he has the knowledge. All that occurred, that is occurring, that will occur, and the things that cannot or did not occur, had they occurred, how they would have happened. He knows that, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this knowledge offers, obviously, allows for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give these divine hypotheses, which is what I'm titling the Quranic theme for this. Because you find this throughout the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word law. He'll use, and if, and had this occurred, and had we put you in this, then this would have been the result, or this would have been the outcome. No one else, absolutely no one else can say that. There's no living creature who can say that with certainty. So you can't say, wallahi, I missed this chance. Had I gone in a day before, had I said this, I would have ended up getting the job. You don't know that. You don't know that for sure. So, and that's where the hypothesis, that's why running these theories can be harmful, because you don't know that for sure. Now, that doesn't mean you can't learn and say, you know what, these are the mistakes I did in my approach. I'm going to fix these mistakes so that next time I try this more appropriately. That's actually how you're supposed to live as a human being, learning. But you can never say, had I done this differently, this would have been the outcome. Or had I been brought up differently, this would have been the outcome. You don't know any of that. So you can't say. That's why the Prophet ﷺ says, فَإِنَّ لَوْ تَفْتَحُ عَمَلَ الشَّيْطَانِ. Saying low opens the door for shaitan to play now. You give him a playground. Because now you can say, oh yeah, you're right. Had you done this differently, oh, what a loser. Look what you did to yourself. Oh, you completely ruined it, didn't you? Wow, what a difference your life would have been. And then you're caught up. I know people who live in a specific moment in the past. They live there. They don't have the ability to leave it. Like they can't get over a missed opportunity or a negative outcome or a loss that they suffered. And they allowed for law to be said. They gave a hypothesis. They said something theoretically, and now they can't get out of it. Now they keep on reminding, had I just not done that? Had I not given him the keys? Had I just that night not let him go? If I just said something before I left, khalas, they can't get over it. And that is absolutely, that is very painful, and it's very harmful to the human psyche and to human experience. It's not healthy at all, which is why the Prophet ﷺ told us, don't do that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will. He can and He will, and He did. And you can follow it through the Quran. It's not one of the 10 top contenders of Quranic themes by any measure. It's not up there. But it's one of the Quranic themes that you'll see enough for it to be described as something that occurs often. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use His omniscience, His knowledge of all, and He'll point out something to you. But what would have happened? How people would have behaved in different situations, or had things been different? None of us know how we would have turned out had we been dealt a different hand growing up. Like none of us know how we would have turned out as human beings had Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dealt us a different hand. You have no idea. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. The way we are right now is the way we are because the circumstances are allowing for it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us in an environment that allows us to be the way we are. Which is why you have to be humble in life. Because Allah, all it takes is a few changes, a few tweaks to your environment, and then a lot of the weaknesses that you carry will be exposed. My weaknesses are hidden and concealed from you because the circumstances that I am in, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala generously has left them and put them in a way where I am able to conceal them. It's not exposing them. But with small changes, subhanahu wa ta'ala can absolutely expose all of my shortcomings and my weaknesses. And you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your life for settle, and that's what you're asking for. Ya Rabb, don't put me in a situation where it exposes my weaknesses, exposes my shortcomings and my lack of faith and my lack of grit and my lack of commitment. But He knows subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the scary part, that He is looking at you right now, and He knows how far He can push you before you break. He knows your breaking points. He knows at what point you would break and you would change your ways and you would no longer be the person you are today. Which is why these hypotheses are extremely scary. Like they're very, very concerning because He's reminding you, by the way, you're only the way you are right now because I haven't really pushed it too far. Remember that. And when you do remember that, by the way, you're much more grateful. You're much more cautious. You start to focus a little bit more about yourself. Maybe I should raise my threshold. Maybe I need to strengthen myself so that my weaknesses are not that obvious. We're always going to have weaknesses, but maybe I should be working on myself and not just depending on the fact that my circumstances are convenient for me to be the way I am. Maybe I need to actually take the advantage that right now I have a leeway, I have time, I have the luxury, the leisure to allow myself to actually work on these weaknesses. Because you can be thrown into the dragon's den at some point in life where you don't have that. Like you lose the luxury of trying to work on yourself because life is difficult. You are just running, trying to put out fires and trying to survive and trying to keep the people you love alive. So do it now when you have the time, when you have the opportunity. So the first set of verses that we're going to go through that are going to be recited in the first 4 rak'at tonight, inshallah we'll join them in Surah Al-Rum, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws us a little bit of a picture. Allahu alladhi yursilu al-riyaha fatuthiru sahaba fayabsutuhu fi as-sama'i kayfa yasha ويجعله كسفا فترى الودق يخرج من خلاله فإذا أصاب به من يشاء من عباده إذا هم يستبشرون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who sends the winds. The winds, they move the clouds. The clouds are spread in the sky however Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to be spread. And then they are taken to a certain land and they rain. And they bring that rain down upon a group of people in a certain place. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has this rain fall down upon a group of people, granting them the nourishment and the ease that they are looking for, especially if you're living. Today here we got a little bit too we're a little bit too spoiled in my as living around in the area with the largest and the largest number and the largest amount of pure bodies of water. Sorry. On the planet. Like there's nowhere else that's surrounded by so much water than where we're living right here. So we get a lot of rain. And sometimes you get so much rain that you start complaining, not forgetting that rain is what brings out the green, and green is what allows people to survive. And if you were to live elsewhere where that's not the case, you would find life much more difficult, and the climate can be much more unforgiving. So rain has always been khair. It's seen by that, not just by people living in the desert, but by humanity in general. I think we're a little bit of an exception to that rule because of how much we see of it, so we end up complaining a little bit, but we shouldn't. Never complain about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah coming from the sky. So فَإِذَا أَصَابَ بِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends the rain to whomever He chooses from His servants, إِذَا هُمْ يَسْتَبْشِرُونَ, you find them in a position of istibshar, meaning they're happy, they're smiling, they have hope for the future. There's bushra. It seems good things are coming. It's going to be a good winter. Right? It'll be a good winter. That means it'll be a good spring. It'll be a good summer. We'll have a lot of fruit. We'll be able to make some money. It'll be a good year for us. And that's how people see rain. Rain is, oh, inshallah, we'll have a good year this year. Well, we won't starve. وَإِن كَانُوا مِن قَبْلِ أَن يُنَزَّلَ عَلَيْهِم مِّن قَبْلِهِ لَمُبْلِسِينَ. And indeed, before all of this, and before specifically this happened, إِن كَانُوا مِن قَبْلِ أَن يُنَزَّلَ عَلَيْهِم, and indeed, before they received the water, the rain, min qablihi, right before it, lemublisin, in a state of loss of hope. Iblis is loss of hope, and that's why we call him Iblis, because he has no hope. Because he has no hope in Jannah. That's why he's called Iblis. Now he probably had a different name before that, and some scholars point out he had a different name before that. It doesn't matter to us, but he is called in the Quran Iblis because Ablas, meaning he lost all hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showing him any mercy yawm al-qiyamah. That's his name, the one who has no hope. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that this is what I do. I send the winds, it takes the clouds. The clouds are sent to a certain group of people. It rains on them. The people, once they receive that rain, they're in a good mood. They're happy. They have hope. And indeed, right before this happened, right before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent that rain by, and right before the rain hit the ground, they were in a state of loss of hope. لَمُبْلِسِينَ فَانظُرْ إِلَىٰ آثَارِ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. So look at the results and the consequences. The athar, the word athar, means the results or the consequences or the aftermath. فَانظُرْ إِلَىٰ آثَارِ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Look at the aftermath of the mercy of your Lord, of the compassion of your Lord. رحمة الله. كيف يحيي الأرض بعد موتها. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings life from a dead piece of land. إن ذلك لمحيي الموتى. Indeed, this process will also bring out other deads. He's referring to us. Like this process that you saw, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent water from the sky and it brought life from something that seemed dead, that same process will bring out other dead things. You and I, yawm al-qiyamah, we brought out similarly. وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. And He is the omnipotent, capable of all. And then He says the following. وَلَئِنْ أَرْسَلْنَا رِيحًا فَرَأَوْهُ مُصْفَرًّا لَظَلُّوا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ يَكْفُرُونَ. And had we sent a wind, just like at the beginning of the ayah, he says, Allahu alladhi yursilu riyah. So he premised this story by saying Allah sends the winds. But those winds, at the beginning of the ayat, are winds that brought rain. This hypothesis that exists at the end of these verses, وَلَئِنْ أَرْسَلْنَا رِيحًا, and if we were to, instead of sending a wind that brought sahab, that brought clouds, فَرَأَوْهُ مُصْفَرًّا, if we sent a wind and they saw the wind to be yellow. Yellow means it's bringing sand. Yellow winds are not winds that bring clouds. Winds that bring clouds come in, they're a little bit chilly, and they bring a bit of, and it's usually blue. That's how the Arab would know so the wind would kind of tell you based on what it's carrying within it, and whether it's moisture, whether it's a moist wind or not, whether it's a blue, the skies are blue, whether it's a little bit chilly. They would know if it's bringing something. Winds that are yellow are winds that are carrying nothing but sand. Right? It's just going to bring sand, and more sand will ruin any crops, and more sand will cause harm. وَلَئِنْ أَرْسَلْنَا رِيحًا فَرَأَوْهُ مُصْفَرًّا لَظَلُّوا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ يَكْفُرُونَ. Then they would have continued in their kufr. They would continue after that with their acts of kufr and disbelief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what is he saying here, subhanahu wa ta'ala? Saying people weren't doing too well. So I sent them some wind that brought them rain. And because they got that rain, they're all happy. They're all happy. A few minutes before that, they were all very upset and almost lost hope, but now they were happy. So look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the consequence of Allah's rahmah upon His people, how He brought life. But He says, but had I sent something different, this is the hypothesis, this is the divine hypothesis. Had I sent something different, had I sent a wind that didn't bring rain, a yellowish wind, a wind that they saw, and they saw within it the sand, then they would have turned full-blown kuffar. They would have lost their faith altogether. What he's pointing out here, subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the human being, unfortunately, does not accept the divine decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way he should. The human being often builds his iman and his optimism and his gratitude and his based on whether he's receiving what he wants versus if he is not. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from His rahmah sends you quite often things that make you happy, things that bring you joy, so that you may find in your heart the space to yastabshirun, to have optimism, to find joy in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's gift to you. But that's not a good basis for your faith. Because if you are in a position where if you get what you want, you accept and you become mustabshir and you have optimism and you work hard and you accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you are granted that which you don't want, something that is not helpful, you're going to lose your faith. لَظَلُّ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ يَكْفُرُونَ. That means your iman in its essence is very circumstantial. And an iman that's circumstantial is very weak. Because all it takes is a small shift of reality. And in this ayah, he's just saying, had I sent rihan fara'uhu musfarra, and they saw it. And actually the scholars, when they talk about this ayah, they say that he's not even saying here, subhanahu wa ta'ala, that had I sent empty winds with sand. No, he said, had I sent those winds, but they saw them as yellow. Fara'uhu musfarra. They saw them as yellow. Meaning the wind could be bringing rain, but the people who looked at those winds, they saw the yellow color. Even though they're bringing rain, they would have lost their faith. لَظَلُّوا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ يَكْفُرُونَ. They would have spent their time after that just yakfurun. Al-kufr here can be disbelief, but it can also be lack of gratitude. Denying that Allah ever did anything good for them. Denying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ever shown them any form of compassion or love or mercy or bounty in all their lives. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوعًا إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. Indeed, the human being is very dramatic. Halua. He's a very dramatic being. If difficulty touches him, he loses all hope. And if goodness comes his way, he holds on to it and doesn't want to give it to anyone else, doesn't want to share with anyone. This is the nature of the human being. It's not a nice nature. This is not a nature you want to hold on to. إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. Except those who have the comprehension of what prayer is. And then the ayat in Surah Al-Ma'arij goes and explains them in depth, right? But this is the problem with the human being. Don't make your iman circumstantial, where if the winds bring you rain, you're mustabshir, you have hope and you have optimism and you're going to do well and you love Allah, and then if the winds bring sand, then you are going to lose your faith and show kufr and hate everything. And don't do that. Don't do that. That's not the right way to go by things. You're making it way too circumstantial. It's way too easy. If it's all based on whether you get what you want or not, then you've built your iman on an extremely weak, fragile foundation. For the lack of another analogy, a little bit of wind, the winds of life will knock you down. The winds of life will knock you down. You have to build your iman on a foundation that is solid, where whether you get the rain winds or you get the sand winds, whether the winds are blue or they're yellow, whether they're what you were hoping for or they're not, your iman is not shaken. You're not one day mustabshir, the other day kafir. No. You continue to be mustabshir. You continue to have great hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, great gratitude for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are seeing the athar of rahmatillah. You always see the consequences of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ongoing bounties and compassion upon His people. It reminds you of resurrection, so you're attached to akhirah. But He pointed this out subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَئِنْ أَرْسَلْنَا رِيحًا. But had we sent a different type of wind, they would have behaved differently. The second set of verses that we have in Surat Luqman, that we'll hear in the second set of 4 rak'at tonight, inshallah ta'ala, and we'll enjoy them. Another hypothesis from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ حَمَلَتْهُ أُمُّهُ وَهْنًا عَلَى وَهْنٍ وَفِصَالُهُ فِي عَامَيْنِ أَنِ اشْكُرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيْكَ إِلَيَّ الْمَصِيرُ. And indeed we have given the human being the wasiyah, the command, regarding his parents. His mother carried him in difficulty upon difficulty, in weakness upon weakness. He was weak and she was, the whole thing was just, it was very fragile. At any point it could have broke. Like the probability of a pregnancy actually occurring appropriately is so low it's not even funny. Like if you can ask a gynecologist, they can explain. Like the OB-GYN group will say, for this to actually work, the probabilities are very low. For it all to work at the same right time, and for it to latch on, and for it to grow up without, like it's so low, but it happens so often. It's just how, the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَهْنًا عَلَى وَهْنٍ. It's so fragile and so weak, at any point it can be ruined. It's very easy. وَفِصَالُهُ فِي عَامَيْنِ. And then it takes 2 years for him to be cut off being breastfed. أَنِ اشْكُرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيْكَ. The command is, I command you to show gratitude to me, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلِوَالِدَيْكَ, and to your parents. إِلَيَّ الْمَصِيرُ. And you will come back to me and I'll ask you about this. And then he gives a hypothesis subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِنْ جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكَ بِي مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٌ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا. And if they end up trying to push against your faith, they try to force you to accept someone else aside from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the power. It's a hypothesis. This almost never happens. Almost never happens. But if it were to happen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you what to do. This hypothesis is important because we don't really have another example that's similar to it. وَإِنْ جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَى جَاهَدَاكَ means they are performing jihad against you. They are striving with all of their might against you, trying to get you to drop your faith. Drop la ilaha illallah. They don't want you to hold on to that. I mean, rarely does this occur, but وَإِنْ جَاهَدَاكَ, if that were to be the case, this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the low piece. فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا. Then you're not to obey. You are commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَنِ اشْكُرْ لِي وَلِوَالِدَيْكَ. You have to show gratitude to Allah and you have to show gratitude to your parents at all times. وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ. The wasiyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is take care of your parents. Take care of them, be kind to them. But if hypothetically, if your parents were to work against you and try to take away your faith from you and force you out of your freedom of religion and force you out of iman billah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the truth that you have found, the reality of this world that you have now arrived at, this conclusion that you are now certain about. If they were to push against you, then you don't obey. وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. And you continue to be the companion, the best companion you can be to them. بِالْمَعْرُوف, with all of the good qualities and all of the good attributes that you can come up with. It's a hypothesis. But he's saying that this is how important your relationship with your parents is. There is no one else on the planet where you are required to treat them that way. No one else. No one else is going to try and force you out of your faith. And then my response is going to be, no, no, continue to be their best friend. And no, I mean, they get away. Get as far away as possible from these people. Remove yourself from their vicinity. If they are striving against you, they're trying to take away your freedom of Iman, and they're trying to ruin your deen, your Islam, get away. But if you told me it's my parents who are doing it, hypothetically, then the answer is وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. Don't change your faith, but continue to be a companion to them. صُحْبَةً وَصَاحِبْهُمَا. Continue to be their companion في الدُّنْيا مَعْرُوفًا, with the best of attributes. وَاتَّبِعْ سَبِيلَ مَنْ أَنَابَ إِلَيْهِ. And follow the pathway of the people who repent to me and come back to me, meaning the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Salihin. ثُمَّ إِلَيَّ مَرْجِعُكُمْ فَأُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. You will all come back to me يوم القيامة, and I'll tell you what you did. So he gave a hypothesis here, subhanahu wa ta'ala, for all of us, because it's hypothetical for Muslims, right? Imagine if this were your case. Imagine if you were here tonight against the will of your parents, meaning they absolutely hated that you came here. You were trying to stop you. Not to the here specifically, but to the masajid in general. You have a lot to be thankful for. The better Muslim you are, the more your parents are going to be happy with you. The more proud they are with you, of you. They're proud of you. They celebrate you because you're closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They love it. Imagine if it was this. Imagine if it was this. Imagine with all of the difficulties that life dishes out, all of the pain, all of the struggling, and on top of all of that, your parents are actively trying to ruin your deen. You can barely hold on to your deen as it is. You can barely be a good Muslim without this going on, and now to add to it, your parents are also trying to ruin it for you, and you can barely do it. Allahu Akbar. But if that were to happen, وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا. You are commanded to continue to be the best companion that you can be to them. You are commanded to be their best companion. بِالْمَعْرُوف, with the best of the attributes that you can come up with. This is what you're commanded to do in this hypothetical. It's hard, by the way. It's very hard. It's very hard to continue to do. Like, had this been the case, it's very hard. If your parents were to be working against you from a faith perspective, it's very hard for you to continue to. And I've had examples. I've had examples. A lot of brothers and sisters who convert to Islam, accept Islam here in this city, and they, at least 3 over the last 5-6 years, have come up with the exact same problem of their parents actively working against them, trying to get them to stop being Muslim. So what do? So I have to quote this. For them, it's not a hypothetical. For them, it's a reality. It's a reality for them. For you, it's a hypothetical. It's a divine hypothetical. Imagine had that been the case for you. It's not. It's not. Had it been, you would still owe them to be the best person. So now that they're not, what do you owe them? If they were trying to ruin your deen, you would still owe them to be the best companion that you could be. Now that they're not doing that, what do you owe them? And that's how you learn from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hypotheticals. The final ayah that I'm going to share with you that will be recited in the last 4 rak'at tonight is an ayah that I think I've talked about. I think I spent a year talking about. I talked about it a lot, especially in the Arabic tafsir halaqat. So you've attended this and you've heard it before. It's all right. This is an absolutely heart-wrenching ayah. It is extremely scary. We read it and we don't think about it, but it's one of the scariest verses, in my opinion, in the Quran. It's the scariest one to me. And it's something worth doing, inshallah, maybe in a future year. I have these rankings where, okay, what's the ayah that, arja ayah fil Quran? What's the ayah that gives you the most hope? The ayah that's most forgiving? The ayah that's most merciful? The ayah that's most this? Most this? Scholars have done this over the years. And I threw my hat into the arena one day, and I sat down and I went through the verses that I felt were the most meaningful to me. And in obviously affiliation with what other scholars have talked about in the past. And this is my scariest ayah, right? And I tried to make them a little bit interesting just so that people can reflect upon them. This exists at the end of the first page that tells us the story of the Battle of the Trench, the Battle of Al-Khandaq. That was by far the most difficult time for the nation of the Prophet ﷺ. So the most difficult time for the Mujahideen was Uhud. The most difficult time for the Prophet ﷺ personally was the day of Al-Ta'if. The most difficult time for the Ummah, for the whole community, was the day of Al-Khandaq, by far. It ranks number 1 with a huge drop down to whatever number 2 was going to be to them. Because they were in the city being marched towards by 10,000 people. Arabs never came together to do anything, like historically, in large numbers. But to demolish Medina, they were able to muscle up 10,000 people from at least 15 different backgrounds, from at least 15 different tribes. Some of those tribes were not allies to one another, to the point where they had to march far away. Like one tribe had to march at the front, at the right, and the other at the left, at the back, because you didn't want them ever seeing one another, because then the whole army would fall to pieces. They would fight each other. You didn't want them getting involved. Like you didn't want Khuza'a and Quraysh to ever meet. You wanted them to be nice and spread out from one another so that they can get this done. So the scariest time for the people of Medina was this battle, to the point where they actually dug a 5-kilometer trench, 3 meters deep, 4 meters wide, which is absolutely insane. One of the craziest things that have happened in our history as Muslims is what they did that day, or within those 15 days. Radiallahu anhum ajma'in, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, because this idea was so far-fetched that I don't even know how he would entertain it. Salman al-Farisi radiallahu anhu gave the idea, why he entertained it, but thankfully he did, because there would have been no hope of them being able, because Medina is very specific. Its landscape is very special. From the east and the west you have al-Harratain, volcanic rock. Till this day, nothing can move on it. Nothing grows in it. You can't do anything about it. It's burnt land. Burnt land that had been burnt for years, for centuries, to the point where it should be researched at some point. I think they're doing that now. But it's nothing can move on it, no tanks, nothing. Nothing can, no cars, you can't. I remember my father had a friend who, rich guy in Medina, Saudi gentleman. Lovely man. Lovely man. I'm very fond of his memory. He taught me a lot of things. And one of the things, he took me to the Harra once, and he showed me, he gave us a rock, and he let me drop it between, like there's all these craters between the rocks. And I dropped the rock, and he told me, put your watch on and drop the rock. So he did that, and I counted for 45 seconds before it hit something, before we heard it made a sound, which was absolutely scary. And the hole that we dropped the rock in, I technically could have fallen into it. So I was like, maybe we should get out of here. But this is how that. So nothing can march there. And in the north, you have the castles of Banu Qurayza. They're large. They're very high walls with very sturdy doors. So they can't come from the north. The only way to enter Medina is from the south. And the south between the two Harra is 5 kilometers. So they dug a trench. In a very long story. And then throughout this battle, it took around 2 weeks for it to end. But towards the end of it, or before it ended, Quraysh struck a deal with the guys who owned the northern castles. They struck a deal that they're going to open the doors. The floodgates are going to open. And the 10,000 people are going to break down into 2 groups. 3,000, along with the Banu Qurayza up front, are going to flood Medina from the north. And then they'll flood the trench from the south. And the Muslims will be between kammasha, as they say. And they'll be squished. They'll be sandwiched between them, and they'll be done. And this was the scariest time for the Muslims. The Muslims were absolutely, if it was terrifying to begin with, now it was beyond terrifying. Now the Muslims were getting really scared. Really scared. Some people were starting to actually step back. Some people were starting to say, well, I have to go be with my family. I think this is over. Some people left their positions because they all had to guard the trench. The job was over 5 kilometers, 1,500 people, going to be spread over the 5 kilometers. You don't move. You stay there day and night. Shifts in terms of sleeping and waking up and eating, but at all times this trench has to be watched, because you have to leave no weakness for them to actually come over. All it takes is a couple of boards, they put them down, a few horses run in, and then chaos breaks loose. People start to leave. Now that didn't happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not allow that to happen. Alhamdulillah, the Battle of the Trench, the deal that was struck between Quraysh and Banu Qurayza, between the Confederates and the owners of the northern castles, didn't come through. They fought through a story that you'll hear later. They didn't agree with each other, so the castles stayed closed. As they were trying to renegotiate their deal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent wind at night that literally would ruin their tents. Like Arabian tents are not like your camping tents where no, these are tents that are very sturdy. But the wind was so ferocious that it was actually ripping the tents, carrying large pots and throwing them for kilometers into the air. It was so bad, the wind, that they couldn't withstand it, so they had to leave, obviously ending the alliance and the whole thing going fine. And it was a big day for the Muslims. The Quraysh never was able after that to ever harm the Muslims again. That was their last lash out. They lashed out for the last time. They almost did it, but they didn't. But then you have this ayah. He says this, subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَوْ دُخِلَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنْ أَقْطَارِهَا And had Medina been entered from its different dimensions or different sides or directions, Al-Aqtar, from the two polar points, from the north and the south. وَلَوْ دُخِلَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ upon the Muslimin, upon the Muslims, upon the people who were standing there that day. The people who were, وَلَوْ دُخِلَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنْ أَقْطَارِهَا, had this deal gone through, had they not required a renegotiation. In the meantime, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved the day. He bailed everyone out with this wind, and people fought, and everyone went in a different direction, and the whole Confederate army dissolved. Had that not happened, had they actually seen this, had they seen the deal through, and they opened those gates, and the flood happened, وَلَوْ دُخِلَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ مِنْ أَقْطَارِهَا ثُمَّ سُئِلُوا الْفِتْنَةَ. And then these people, the Muslims, he's talking about some of the Sahaba, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's talking about some of the people who were standing there that day with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. With the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. He's not talking about the munafiqeen. He's talking about people who were standing there with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Had this happened, and then you would have lost, meaning the battle would have ended quickly. And then people would have put swords under your necks, asking you or demanding you fitna. What does this mean? Meaning demanding you to leave your faith. Su'ilul fitna, meaning you're being asked to tuftan fi dinik, meaning that you're going to lose your iman. You're going to go back to polytheism. You're going to go back to ibadat al-asnam. You're going to denounce the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and denounce Islam altogether. لَآتَوْهَا, they would have offered it. They would have offered it. وَمَا تَلَبَّثُوا بِهَا إِلَّا يَسِيرًا, and they would have only hesitated before they did for a very short period of time. Yasira, just a little bit. Just a little bit. They would have just hesitated for a second and they said, fine, whatever. I'll offer you whatever you want. That didn't happen. It didn't happen. Alhamdulillah, it didn't happen. So we don't know which of the Sahaba would have done this or not. But the Sahaba radiallahu anhum did. But they did. Each one of them knew if this was talking about them or someone else. The Quran didn't come and expose fulan, 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 fulan. Had this happened, they would have no. Just وَلَوْ دُخِلَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ, upon them. Then many of them would have lost their faith. Imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about Ashab Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, the best of all nations that ever existed after him alayhi salatu wasalam, the people of the highest ranking, the highest status that we have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, instead of the ayat coming and say, good job for standing your ground during the day of Ahzab. No. The Quran came and said, by the way, had I allowed this to happen, had I allowed Banu Qurayza and Quraysh to actually agree, and they opened those gates, and they entered upon you from the north and from the south, and you lost that war, and they came and they tried to force you out of your deen, you would have accepted. You would have given up your faith. You wouldn't have stood your ground till the end. You wouldn't have held on to La ilaha illallah to your grave. You wouldn't have fought till the last moment. You would have given up and accepted, okay, fine, whatever you want. And you would have hesitated only a little bit. It wouldn't have been that difficult for them. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. La ilaha illallah. No one can put this hypothesis in motion aside from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one can say that except from him. No one else. By the way, had this ayah not been in the Quran and I said something like that, 3 or 4 people would have picked me up and thrown me outside the masjid, and that's it. Because this is very rude. How dare you say that about the Sahaba? And I agree. I have no right to say that. And I would never say, no one in their right mind would dare say something like that. But Malik al-Mulk subhanahu wa ta'ala, the divine, no, he'll say that. Because he knows, he sees. He sees what you would have been had he changed the circumstances for you. He sees where you would have been had he just modified your environment a little bit. You are where you are right now because of, he didn't. But he can show you, here, look, if I did this to you, had I sent this problem your way, look at what you have done. Look at what you would have done. And that's what he told the Sahaba, that I didn't let them come in. But had I done that, لَآتَوْهَا وَمَا تَلَبَّثُوا بِهَا إِلَّا يَسِيرًا, you would have given up the faith out of fear. It would be so scary that you say, I don't want, you wouldn't have held your ground to the last moment, as you should have. Exposing for the Sahaba, or some of them, a weakness that some of them had. A weakness in their iman that some of them carried. Not to chastise them, because if the point was to chastise them, then he would have given us, subhanahu wa ta'ala, their names, so that forever we can talk about their weakness. But he didn't give us their names so that they can learn, so that they can identify that there's a weakness of your iman inside of you. Strengthen it. Strengthen it so that you can change this hypothesis. So this hypothesis, this theory here could change. Strengthen your iman so that had they entered from the north or the south, you would have still held on to your deen. You want that to be the hypothesis of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That whether they had come from the north or the south, I was Muslim when they didn't, and I would have stayed Muslim had they done it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, no, some of you, had this happened differently, they wouldn't have stayed Muslim. And if that's not scary to you, then I don't know what is. Being reminded by Allah, by the way, I know where your breaking point is. I know how far I can push you before you break. I know. Do you know? Do you know your breaking point? Why not? Why don't you know your breaking point? And why aren't you working actively to change it? And why aren't you making sure that you are working towards changing your nature so that your breaking point is not that close, pushing it as far away as possible? You don't do that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees that as an act of arrogance, an act of disrespect, lack of reverence. And He can, subhanahu wa ta'ala, within your life at some point, give you that nudge that you need. Give you the nudge that you need to lose it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of us, wallahi. This is something that we all have to be very, very grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for. Ya Rab, lakal hamd, we're sitting here today because you have allowed us to. A very small change in circumstance and we would not be here today. Learn that. Remember that He sees it. Remember that He identifies it, subhanahu wa ta'ala. He just chose not to put you in that situation out of rahmah to you and out of love to you. فله الحمد وله المنة سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا